I was always that skeptic, until that night on the Navajo reservation that changed everything. It was early autumn in Arizona, a time when the desert's temperatures dropped and an eerie calm fell over the land. I'd been invited, albeit reluctantly, by a local guide to spend a few nights at a modest hotel on the outskirts of Tuba City, a place that, according to whispered local lore, was haunted by restless spirits. I remember the warnings clearly. Before I arrived, an elderly Navajo man named Nez, with eyes full of years and sorrow, pulled me aside. In a hushed voice he said, "Stay inside after sundown. The land here carries the memories of our ancestors. Do not wander. Their spirits are not always kind to those who disturb the resting place." I nodded, half in respect and half in disbelief. I'd come to experience the raw essence of Native American paranormal lore firsthand, a real encounter with the unknown. The first evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, the desert sky filled with a bruised purple twilight. I sat in the motel's dimly lit common area, written notes on my phone, when I began to hear it. A distant, almost imperceptible sound, like the low murmur of a chant carried by the wind. It was almost musical, yet laden with sorrow. I tried to convince myself it was just a cool desert breeze rustling some old cottonwood trees, but my skin prickled with a sense of foreboding. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the aging floorboards, every soft whisper outside my door sent adrenaline through my veins. At some point, I must have dozed off for a few restless hours, only to be abruptly wakened by a sound that chilled my blood. A slow, deliberate knock at my door. I fumbled for my phone. Its flashlight gleamed, trembling in the darkness, and slowly crept to the door. I peeked out, but the corridor was empty. I retreated back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. I then recalled Nez's warning not to wander and realized that maybe my curiosity was my greatest enemy. But something drove me to investigate, a morbid need to see if there was any truth in what I'd heard. After an agonized hour of sleepless tension, I stepped outside. The night was inky black, lit only by the scattering of the stars, the crisp desert air biting at my skin. I took a cautious step towards the motel's back, where the guide had mentioned an old, unused service road that led towards a small abandoned building rumored to have been a ceremonial lodge long ago. Locals said that sometimes the spirit of a young Navajo woman, known by the name Atsa, a shaman's daughter who died under mysterious circumstances, was seen near that building at night. They called her the Weeping Ghost. My feet carried me along the lonely path until I reached a clearing just outside the motel compound. The abandoned building sat silent, its wooden walls weathered, the remnants of paint peeling away as if erasing its past. I turned on my phone's camera for evidence, intending only to record a few minutes of footage, if nothing else. As I pointed the camera towards the building, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, slender and shrouded in a tattered shawl, stood at the edge of the clearing. It was hard to tell if she was sitting or just standing, but her head was bowed, and a sorrowful melody seemed to emanate from her. I couldn't distinguish words, only a deep mournful sound, like a lament that transcended language. That is when I froze. The figure turned slowly towards me. In that fleeting moment, I could see her eyes. They were deep and hollow, as if filled with endless grief. I felt a wave of profound sadness, as if her loss was my own. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished into the darkness, leaving no trace but an echo of the lament in the wind. With my heart murmuring, I fumbled back to my motel, my mind racing. Was it real? Was it actually witnessing a manifestation of Native American lore? The restless spirit of a woman cursed to wander the sacred grounds of her ancestors. I couldn't shake the image of those hollow eyes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and instead, I huddled with a blanket in the lobby, trying to calm my thoughts. Yet every gust of wind outside and every groan of the building's old structure sent shivers down my spine. In the morning, I found evidence on my phone. The video I had recorded, the one where I was trying to capture her image, contained nothing but static for most of the duration, until near the end, when a barely visible, ghostly shape flickered on screen. I showed it to Nez, who only nodded solemnly and said, "You have seen the sorrow of our land." The incident left me haunted for weeks. I began hearing soft, echoing voices outside my window late at night, and I sometimes felt the inexplicable sensation of being watched, as if invisible eyes were following my every move. I even encountered a local driver on the highway who told me of a similar experience near the same area. An account of a traveler who had seen the weeping ghost while driving at dusk, only to feel an inexplicable chill as his car radio faded to static. In the days that followed, I found that my experience was not an isolated one at all. Other visitors, and even some longtime residents, spoke in hushed tones about encounters with Atsa's spirit. Some said the appearance near old grave sites hidden among the rocky outcrops, her mournful cries carried by the window. Others claimed that the closest they'd come to her was in her dreams, a nightmare where her face pressed against the window, silently pleading for help. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what I experienced that night. All I can say is that I've been irrevocably changed. The boundaries between the living and the dead blurred for me, and I learned that some places on the earth carry memories so deep that the past itself refuses to be forgotten. The land of the Navajo holds secrets that echo across time, and that night, I was forced to confront them, raw, unfiltered, and terrifyingly real. I sometimes still catch myself glancing at my phone screen when the wind picks up, half expecting to see those sorrowful eyes looking back at me. And though I eventually left the reservation, the memory of that haunted night, the ghostly figure, and the unspoken sorrow of the land will forever remain etched in my mind as proof that there are forces in the world beyond our understanding, and that sometimes you should hear the warnings of those who know the land best. This is not just a story of haunting. It is a reminder that time does not erase the past, and that in certain corners of this country, the echoes of history and tragedy are forever alive. I will never forget the night I spent on the Cherokee Nation Reservation in northeastern Oklahoma, an experience that shattered my long-held skepticism about the paranormal. It was late October, and the air was crisp with a deep chill of autumn. I had been invited by a local contact, a reserved man known simply as Red Hawk, to spend a couple of nights in the Teleconqua. His warnings were clear. Don't stray into the old cemetery after dark, and avoid the abandoned mission house off Highway 62. Some things here would like to be disturbed. Here through his tone was solemn. I couldn't help but to be drawn in by the mystery surrounding these places, a lure I'd been followed on countless journeys before. That first night I settled into a modest hotel on the edge of town. The building itself was old, its linoleum floors creaking with each step and the wallpaper faded by decades of harsh Oklahoma winters. But it provided an authentic glimpse into local life. As darkness fell, I felt that familiar stirring of anticipation mixed with apprehension. I remember stories of ghostly figures that wandered the cemetery. So-called weeping Cherokee, a spirit said to haunt the graves of those who died alone. Her cries echoing in the cold wind. I tried to get some sleep, but the silence of the night was punctuated by mysterious murmurs outside my window. At first, I dismissed the sounds as the wind blowing through the barren trees, or maybe even the hushed tones of locals passing by. Yet as the night deepened, I began to hear something else. A soft, anguished weeping that seemed to come from the distance. Curiosity, that double-edged sword, urged me to investigate. After midnight, unable to fend the pull of the unknown, I grabbed my phone, its flashlight my only companion, and slipped out of the hotel. I made my way towards the old cemetery Red Hawk had warned me about, which was a sprawling, weathered plot where generations of Cherokee were laid to rest. The cemetery was obscured by low-hanging fog, and the autumn leaves, damp with dew, crunched underfoot as I approached. Each step stirred memories of whispered legends, of a woman who had lost her husband to the ravages of war, of children taken too soon, of grief so profound that her spirit was doomed to wander in perpetual mourning. I wasn't sure how much of it was a fact, and how much was folklore, but tonight, the boundary between myth and reality felt refreshingly thin, but also frightening. As I reached the perimeter, the weeping grew louder, an almost unbearable sound of despair echoing off the crumbling stone tombs. I walked slowly between rows of ancient gravestones, illuminated only by the narrow beam from my phone. The names and dates, worn smooth by time and weather, seemed to blend into one long aching chorus of loss. And then I saw her, a figure in the distance, standing beside an old mausoleum covered in ivy. The woman's appearance was at once mesmerizing and horrifying. She was dressed in a tattered, once beautiful dress that fluttered in the cold breeze, her long hair obscuring half her face. I couldn't make out what her features were clearly, but what struck me most were her eyes, large, hollow, and filled with endless sorrow. I remember thinking it was as if I was looking into a void of grief itself. That's when I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure turned slowly towards me, and in that moment, time seemed to halt. I could feel an oppressive silence, a silence that was loaded with pain and sorrow. The ghostly woman raised a hand at what might have been a greeting, but the gesture was haunted by despair. I could almost hear her thoughts whispering on the wind, a language of anguish that transcended words. With my heart pounding, I turned to flee, but the fog made every step uncertain. I fumbled through the darkness, my flashlight jittering as I retraced my steps. I didn't dare look back until I reached the relatively safety of the motel lobby. There, huddled in a corner with shaking hands, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I reviewed the short video I'd managed to capture before panic took full control. The footage was grainy and choppy, but for a few heart-stopping seconds, I saw her. The soft movement of her shawl, the vacant stare that seemed to pierce right through the screen. By morning, the initial shock had given way to a relentless, haunting curiosity. I asked around discreetly at the local diner, and I was met with knowing glances and hushed recollections. An older local, his eyes weary with the weight of long-held secrets, told me, "You've seen her, haven't you? They say she's the spirit of Lillian, a young Cherokee woman who lost her family to smallpox during the 19th century. She wanders these grounds, forever mourning, seeking solace that she never received in life." I returned to the cemetery at midday, braving the daylight with a mix of courage and dread, to search for any physical signs of her presence. I found nothing that definitively proved her existence, except for the untouched memorial that bore her name, Lillian. It was as if nature itself had left that spot undisturbed, a silent tribute to the life of sorrow. The atmosphere was heavy with an ineffable sense of loss, and I felt tears prick my eyes as I stood there. Over the next few days on the reservation, I began noticing patterns. Every dusk, the soft sound of crying would echo faintly, sometimes accompanied by a chill that raised the hairs on my arms. My phone's battery would inexplicably drain faster near certain old crumbling structures. Locals mention that they may have experienced their own encounters with Lillian, an apparition who appears when the fog rolls in the veil between the living and the dead thins. One man even said he saw her at a long-abandoned mission near the river, where she stood silently watching the water flow past, as if waiting for someone long gone. The experience left me scarred in more ways than one. I realized that in the quiet, unassuming corners of our world, history just doesn't reside in books. It lives, breathes, and sometimes mourns its lost souls. That night on a cemetery, I wasn't just an observer. I became a part of a tragic narrative that stretched back generations. A narrative that reminded me how fragile life is, and how the past can reach out to remind us it's still here. Even now, when I travel to other parts of the country or revisit old photographic memories of my phone, I occasionally see a blur of mist or feel that same chill as though Lillian's sorrowful spirit lingers just beyond the edge of my vision. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the intense motions of that night, a trick of the light. But deep down, I know what I experienced was real. Every time I share this story, people ask me if I believe in ghosts now, and I can't help but nod, because I've had a taste of the inexplicable, and it left me with the understanding that in places where centuries of grief, memory, and history converge, some spirits never rest. They linger, not for the sake of haunting, but as timeless echoes of lives once lived, urging us to remember and respect the weight of the past. That night on the Cherokee Reservation changed my outlook on life, and on the delicate interplay between memory and the paranormal. I learned that sometimes the warnings of locals hold more truth than any skeptic's rational mind can accept, and that when you venture into the realm of the forgotten, you might just find that the past isn't dead at all. It's waiting quietly in the fog. I'm from Oklahoma, Shawnee if that matters, and there's a place about an hour out in the woods called Sacred Heart that has haunted me for years. The original Sacred Heartland, long since fenced off and abandoned, still echoes with its troubled past. Just beyond the old ground stands the new Sacred Heart Church, a modern building that starkly contrasts with the history buried beneath its fence. The land was once a thriving complex founded in 1877, a monastery, a school for boys, and a school for girls. It was one of those places where Native American children were sent in an effort to civilize them, an attempt to erase culture with forced assimilation. In 1901, a devastating fire erupted in the dining room of the boys' school, spreading with such fury that only a diminutive two-story bakery and an old barn survived the inferno. All those inside were lost, and the ghost of that tragedy are said to still wander the grounds. Shattered across the property are several small graveyards, quiet, sorrowful patches of land that hold the names and memories of those who once lived and died there. I've never heard many stories over the years from locals. Tales of an entity known as the Deer Lady, half deer and half woman, rumored to lure unsuspecting men into the woods, only to seal their fate. While these legends chilled me, nothing compares to the experiences I had with my friends when we decided against our better judgment to sneak into the old Sacred Heart land at night. The first encounter was on a cool, crisp October night. My friends and I had been planning this for weeks, daring each other to confront the legends head on. As soon as we stepped onto the perimeter of the abandoned compound, I felt an overwhelming sense of being unwelcome. The air was thick with the weight of centuries-old sorrow and unspoken warnings. We pressed forward along a narrow, overgrown path that wound through the ghostly remains of what was once a bustling campus. Before long, we reached the ruins of the old bakery. It was a small two-story building with peeling painting and broken windows. Above the weathered door was a large arched window, the glass nearly intact despite years of neglect. I remember glancing up and feeling as if I were being watched from within. I asked one of my friends to take a quick photo of the window. When I looked at the image later on my phone, there was no denying the sight. A clear, ghostly silhouette standing in the window, its features indistinct and sorrowful. Something in that moment told me we should leave. We hadn't brought flashlights that night, and the thought of getting lost on a cursed land didn't appeal to any of us. We hurried back, our unease growing with each step away from that haunted bakery. The second and unsettling foray not long after that night, curiosity overrode caution, and we planned a second excursion, this time well equipped with flashlights and a camera with fresh batteries. Our goal was simple: walk further into the compound and see if we could piece together more of its tragic past. We traversed worn-out trails and soon came across several small graveyards, each one quiet and somber. At first, there were nothing more than eerie reminders of the past. But then, we found a third cemetery that seemed entirely different. A small plot dominated by a large, imposing crucifix headstone. Its design was elaborate, weathered by time but still unmistakably striking. Drawn to it, my friend decided to take some photos. The first shot came out oddly blurred, as if something interfered with the lens. He stepped closer, capturing another blurry image, but a little clearer. Then, determined, he advanced further and took one more picture. As the camera's flash went off, something bizarre happened. The camera immediately shut down. We had just replaced the batteries before our outing, and all of our flashlights suddenly died as well, plunging us into a pitch-black silence. In that uncanny instant, every sound, the crickets, the rustling of leaves, even the distant hum of the night, vanished into an oppressive, unnatural quiet. In that harrowing silence, panic set in. We fumbled to restart our lights, and when they finally flickered back on, we bolted back towards the exit. The oppressive feeling seemed to intensify as we retraced our steps through the dim, fog-laden paths. An encounter with the unknown halfway back to our starting point, as if guided by some unseen force, we noticed a glow in the clearing up ahead. Cautiously, we moved forward towards it. Through the sparse light, we recognized a small circle of figures gathered around a fire. But the odd thing was, when we finally got closer enough to see them clearly, they weren't even visible because they had gone. They had disappeared. We wondered what had happened.